You're listening to the Conversations with KidsPeace podcast. Advice, information, and inspiration from experts at the leading provider of mental and behavioral health services for children, adults, and those who love them. Now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast series, Conversations with KidsPeace. I'm Bob Martin. Let me start with a small personal revelation. I tried to be a Boy Scout as a kid, but as my Scoutmaster said one day, it just didn't take with me. The one thing I remember as a positive was reading the Scouting Manual's exhaustive section on first aid. As a kid growing up in suburban Indianapolis, it felt so exotic to learn about applying a tourniquet, what to do about sunstroke, or how to treat a venomous snake bite. We all know about the importance of learning first aid for physical injury or ailments, but is there a corresponding function for mental health or emotional crises? A national group says there is, and KidsPeace's Rob Harvey is one of those the group has trained to train others in mental health first aid, and he joins us now. Rob, as always, great to talk with you.
Nice to talk to you too, Bob.
All right. Let's start at the beginning. How did this national program, Mental Health First Aid, come to be, and how did you get involved in it?
Okay, so mental health first aid actually started in Australia. There were two founders. It was Betty Kitchener and Anthony Jorm in 2001. And they really looked at their community and said, we need people better prepared to deal with mental health issues. That, you know, it needs to be more than just professionals that are ready to deal with it. So they started putting together some material, and they created this course so that not just professionals, but that the general community is ready to respond to mental health crises the same as they would to a medical issue. Then they gained a lot of ground, showed a lot of really great results from their training. And the United States kind of took notice of that. And so they brought it over here and created the USA version of mental health first aid. So it's you know, they're one and the same. They operate together. It's not like our version that we copied from them, but actually is associated with them as well.
So this is a train the trainer type of thing, right?
Yes. So my training was as a trainer. So I certify people in the course. And the idea is that once you are done, you are as my trainers refer to it, as a mental health first aider. So you are able to apply this process to people, to family members, to people you work with, to anyone, a bystander, someone on the street, it would even apply to.
So can you give us a quick overview of that process, with how the program works?
Sure. So it's an 8-hour course. And when I say 8 hours, it's 8 hours of training, which confuses a lot of people because you think like, oh, it's a 9 to 5 day. It's not a 9 to 5. So we usually split it up into two parts because, people really are used to kind of doing that 8-hour day and getting out right at the end. So we split it up into 2 days for the most part. And we focus on the two different days, or the two sections, depending on how you do it, really focus on first on educating the person as to what to look for. Okay, building your spidey senses, so to speak, so like, okay, it seems like something's going on with this person, knowing what to look for. We do review some of the different diagnoses, but the point of the training is not to be able to diagnose someone. That is, we recognize first and foremost that is out of our hands. You're not having psychologists and psychiatrists attend this training because they've already got that pretty much down pat. So it's really about recognizing those risks and what might happen. So that's the first part. And then the second part focuses on their actual action plan. And I would encourage you to take the training to find out what that action plan is specifically. But it really lays out the steps from recognizing a crisis to approaching them, to how to listen to them, to how to give them feedback, and then how to connect them to the help that they need.
That's great. And of course, as you outline that, I'm thinking that there's actually quite a few similarities between formal training in first aid for physical injury or ailments, as well as mental health first aid. Is that true? I mean, do you see the connections there?
Absolutely. It was actually, that was kind of what they had in mind when they were forming the course. When you take certain versions of medical first aid, you follow the steps, the ABCs, the airway breathing compressions or airway breathing circulation. So they said, we really want to have this action plan that people can remember, so that it's not just about waiting for real help to show up. With regular first aid, you see someone bleeding, you don't just call the ambulance and then watch them bleed. Hopefully, I would hope you would not do that. You would go over and you would do what you can, what you know, some basic steps. And so the creators of this said, we want people to approach people in a mental health crisis in the same way, not run away or back away or look the other way, which is really, what we're taught to do from a young age. I'll always remember, you're in the supermarket and there's someone acting differently or, doing something out of the norm. And what does mom say? She says, don't look at them, right? Let's go this way, so, and I always thought, like, how terrible is it to be the person that nobody ever looks at or smiles at, so, and that was their focus, was to say, we should all be prepared to deal with this just as we would with a medical first aid kind of problem.
And I think you've alluded to this, but the other side of that, the similarities, is the differences. And it sounds like you're really talking about something where you're basically trying to get someone stable so that they can get their issues addressed by professionals in the field.
Absolutely. So, from the very beginning, we say this is not the end. We are not the ultimate goal for actually getting this person help, or providing the help at least, but we can be the person to connect them. There's a lot of research about how, young people who have, because we do the youth version of this training. So there is an adult version. That was actually what started as, but we do a one that's kind of more targeted towards adolescents. So, the big difference there is that, or the main purpose there is that we are not providing the ultimate treatment, but we are connecting them to it, or recognizing, and we might be that trusted adult who they look to and they can talk to, whereas they might not be as comfortable with a professional immediately, or they might be terrified of treatment. There's probably the biggest goal of mental health first aid is to try to beat this stigma that we are at constant odds with, that says that, if you have a mental health problem, you're weak. You weren't able to beat it. You're not trying hard enough.
It's a character flaw, not a condition that you need to look into. And I always am taken by people who, especially, the professionals here at KidsPeace, who draw the analogy and said, if somebody came in and their arm was broken, you wouldn't say, well, is it really broken? Or are you just, is your arm weak? Is your bones, couldn't they be a little bit stronger? And, the same analogy goes to folks who are dealing with, a mental or behavioral health or an emotional crisis.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, what kind of interventions, and I want to make it clear to everybody listening, we're not doing the training here today.
Right.
This is not what that's about. But can you give us examples of what kinds of things would be interventions if someone were presented with another person that was obviously in crisis?
Sure. So we talk about kind of two areas. So we talk about crisis situations. So a person who's like talking about killing themselves, a person who's having a severe panic attack. So we talk about how to approach those, and it's always, our first priority is their safety. So if they've attempted to kill themselves and they're bleeding, or they've ingested pills, our first priority is their body's safety. So we're calling the ambulance. We're kind of providing that, actual, physical first aid. But for things where they're not at risk for, dying or, severe harm, we're approaching them first, which is really important because, like we said before, our inclination is get out of here, right? I don't want to be
step
near this
away.
person.
I'm going to back away. I'm going to pretend that I don't see it.
Exactly. And we do talk about your own safety, so we all know there's, people in various communities that, that could be dangerous, so it's not about, you don't have to approach, but, being comfortable with saying like, you know what? I know how to do this. I'm trained. I'm comfortable. I'm going to go in. I'm going to be confident. I know how to open up conversation. We talk about how to listen to them, which is, a huge part. And that's my favorite part of the course is the listening piece, because you can use it across the board. So how to listen to them, and then how to encourage help, and how to kind of connect them to help without making them feel like it's their fault, without judging them, without pushing things on them, because otherwise you could damage, you might be the one with a relationship, but now you've just thrown that out the window because you've made them feel crazy. You've made them feel broken. You've made them feel weak.
And it's so hard, isn't it, that for folks to deal with individuals when you might say in your own life, well, what you seem to be triggered by, or isn't that important? Don't get upset about that. It would seem to me that while that sounds like a very reasonable thing, probably in that situation, it's pretty much on the other side of the circle from reasonable.
Right. Yeah, we slam doors all the time with people. They open up and they start talking, and then we immediately get to solving their problem. Let me tell you what you need to do. Oh, I went through that. Here's what I did. And you just slammed the door because they finally opened up. You got to that point where they trusted you. And now they're like, here we go again. You're just like everybody else who wants to tell me what I have to do to get better, and it's really difficult. So that's, that training piece of we practice it. It's not just about like, okay, here's the things that I want you to do. And you're like, yeah, that sounds really great. And then you go home and you forget it. I have
a checklist in my wallet. Let me get that out and go into what I'm supposed to say to you,
So we practice it. We role play it in a very, it's not scary role play. I know that I've taken trainings before where I'm like, I don't want to do this. It's much less threatening than that. But you actually practice it. You get, that kind of routine. And then we also talk about, things that aren't, like huge crises, where a person is just, they're having trouble sleeping, or they're really upset about something, or they're feeling depressed or anxious. So how to talk to those people. And they might not need, to see a psychiatrist immediately. They might not need to be, seeking like true professional help.
An intervention, so to speak.
Right. They might not need that piece, but, just that opening up to us and establishing that communication so that if it does become worse, and that's a big piece that I want people to understand, is that it's not about, teaching them right now, about getting to the heart of the matter right now. Sometimes it's just planting that seed that says, I'm a person you can trust. I'm not going to push you into talking about something you don't want to talk about, and just kind of laying that groundwork.
What are the groups or the types of people you feel would benefit the most to look into participating in the training?
Great question. So I do train a lot of professionals, so mental health workers and caseworkers and things like that. So it definitely helps people who have had training. So sometimes people come into the training, as I myself, I'll admit, like when I was initially going to be trained, I was like, this is going to be like a review. I already kind of know this, but I was pleasantly surprised. So it definitely has a lot of good material for a person who's already trained, but it really is fantastic for teachers, for coaches, for bus drivers, for parents. I can tell you personally, I've used this as a husband. I've used this as a father. I've used it as a friend, probably even more than I've used it professionally, but I've absolutely used it professionally. Absolutely. So I think that, anyone who's part of the community who wants to be, who wants to kind of help us defeat this stigma and who wants to be prepared and not have to run away from these situations would be a great audience for it.
If somebody's inspired to be part of it, how would they get more information?
There is a Youth Mental Health First Aid website, the Mental Health First Aid website with the Youth portion. And you can look at the available trainings right there. We offer them through KidsPeace, and those would also be listed on the website as well, because every time we register a course, it gets put up there. So you can look for trainings nearby, by location, by time. So you can find out more information, and you can definitely sign up for a training right there.
And we'll get that link to the website and put that up on our blog as well. So
Great.
Final question, Rob. Mm-hmm. We ask each of our guests to help our audience out with a piece of advice, an idea, or a suggestion, maybe just a little inspiration to get through the day. We call it our life hack. Mm-hmm. Give you an example. This is one. I go back now 15 years probably. I used to have a real problem in prematurely sending emails, like hitting send.
Yes.
And somebody pointed out to me, said, if you don't fill in the subject line until the very end, the system won't let you send the email. It'll come back and say, you didn't put a subject line. Do you want to title this something? And I started it, and it cured that problem for me.
Wow.
I mean, it's not, a life hack might be a little grandiose to say that.
Right.
But anyway, can you share your best life hack with our audience?
Oh, that was a good one, though. You kind of, now I'm like, I need to do that. Well, okay. So what I've been thinking about and what I really like to do is, there's a lot of research, if you look into it, about how many positive statements you should make versus corrective statements. So I'm talking about interacting with your children, interacting with people you work with, interacting with other people altogether. And the research really, it looks at like you should really be saying like at least 4 positive things for every one negative thing you say. And that does not happen. Like you look at my children, I'm like, stop, cut it out. Seriously, we're doing that again, right? So I'm saying like hundreds of corrective statements.
You are getting a real deficit in the positive.
Yes. So here's something that I tell people to do, and something that I do myself, right? So if you place, it can be anything. It could be sticky notes. It could be objects. It could be pictures, anything. So you place things throughout your home, right? Or throughout your place of work, in your classroom, wherever it is that you want to make more positive statements, right? And you know that every time you see one of those things, right? So you put a sticky note on your microwave, right? And I see that sticky note, and I know every time I see one of those, I need to turn to my children and I need to find something about what they're doing right then and praise it. And not just say like, hey, you're awesome, but like, I love the way that you're playing right now. I love the way that you're sharing that kind of, directed praise. Right. It rewires your brain, and you eventually don't need those sticky notes anymore. You just start making these positive statements, and the kid starts doing things to get those positive statements instead of, I've always said the one statement, the one saying that bears the test of time is the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Kids know all they have to do is, do something they're not supposed to do, and they immediately get their parents' attention, right? I'm off of my cell phone, I'm off of the computer, and I'm like, hey, right? Right. So you rewire your brain to say like, okay, they're paying attention to me now when I'm doing something I'm supposed to do.
Right.
And they do it more, and you praise them more, and it's a really amazing upward swing.
That is a great idea. And you're right that it's you could see the application, as you noted, in terms of parenting, in terms of a situation where you're kind of in charge. But I'm thinking like if you're in the store shopping and to say to that clerk, hey, you've been really helpful. Thanks a bunch.
Yes.
I can't imagine that it wouldn't be a great thing for them to hear. And it makes you feel better as well, rather than, the alternative.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob Harvey, certified trainer in mental health first aid. Again, Rob, thanks for being here. It is always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us and listening. We hope that you will join us again for more conversations with KidsPeace. Take care. If you have comments, questions, or suggestions about our Conversations podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Go to www.kidspeace.org to learn more about the series and share your thoughts.